Hello, this is Kathy Gale, Executive Director of Interfaith Senior Programs, with the sequel to Interfaith the webinar. So hopefully you are looking at the first slide that says thank you. And again, we want to express appreciation for all of you for taking the time to be involved in our strategic planning process and to take time to look at this webinar. So this will be another short presentation. I'll be giving an update on our process, letting you know what has happened since our January meeting, giving you the goals for our March 3rd meeting, and incorporating some yoga just to make it a little bit more interesting. So here's our review of the January 20th meeting. This is the one that was held at Citizens Bank of Mukwonago. Most of you attended the meeting. Our goals were to review the 4 pillars, learn about the current state of the agency, and provide input on mission, vision, and values. And finally, we asked you to prioritize our strategic goals. Your role was to represent your group, to give us honest and candid responses to our work, and also to learn about what we're trying to do and become an ambassador in the community. So here are the 4 pillars, just as a review. They are to identify partnerships, increase capacity, clarify our brand, and develop programs and services. So here are the key questions that came out of the January 20th meeting. What is capacity? The data that we presented you with on January 20th reflected our need for more volunteers, but you asked, what about money, office space, and staff? What also happened was we were asked about Interfaith. We need more data. What trends are you seeing? How many people do you serve? What types of services, and so on? And of course, the question arose, what about services to people under 60 years old? And we asked things like, who else provides services? Are there enough services available in the right type? And we had a discussion about whether or not our volunteers feel prepared to work with clients who have mental illness. So here's what happened after the January 20th meeting. The steering committee met, reviewed the 4 pillars and the priorities that were developed. We discussed the question of services to individuals under 60 years old. We took quite a bit of time to finesse the mission and the vision using your input. And then we met again. We finessed the goals under each pillar. We did some grouping of like goals under logical pillars, moving some things around. We identified those unanswered questions that needed attention, such as, what does it mean to increase capacity? And here I've included a yoga pose, the committee meeting pose. And you can see that you sit and you put your hand or your head on your hand. It allows you to stretch your neck and look like you're paying attention. A lot of that was practiced at the steering committee meetings. So back to the first question, what is capacity? This is something that was talked about quite a bit by one of the small groups and then brought to the large group. So I looked up 2 definitions, and you can read these, and I've included the hyperlinks so you can go on to the websites and take a look at where I found them. I like in particular the second quote, and I've bolded the area that I think is relevant. Strengthening the management and governance of nonprofits to improve their performance and impact. So let's take a look at my interpretation as it relates to our agency. What is capacity? Possessing or developing sufficient money, volunteers, employees, a committed board of directors, technology, office space, a culture of learning, agreed upon values that guide decision making. All of that is done to enable the organization to develop leadership, remain stable, plan strategically, implement programs, and ultimately carry out the mission in the community. So here's another way of looking at it. What is capacity? Strength, discipline, with all that that encompasses, control, willpower, rigor, measurement, outcomes, all of that, and flexibility. Another yoga pose. So what are some of the things that impede capacity? Well, over here on the left, you see a man who's chasing money. This is something that can happen easily in the nonprofit community. An example of chasing money in our organization might look like this. The executive director might get an email with funding opportunities for Senior Olympics. The executive director, who's faced with the sustainability plan pose at the bottom, how on earth are we going to get through this year, might think, well, we have seniors, and maybe if I write a grant and we get some buses, we could pick up the seniors and we could take them to Senior Olympics and they can compete. So we'll bring some money into the agency and that will help to pay the staff salaries, and we'll somehow figure out how to get them all to Senior Olympics. That would be something that would be chasing the money and probably not very related to our agency's mission. And when you have an executive director that does a lot of chasing the money, she ends up in the restricted funding pose that you see on this screen. And this is something that, as you can imagine, can't be sustained for a long period of time. So we go back to the 4 pillars. And looking at increased capacity, the steering committee did work and came up with goals that we will present to you next week related to volunteers, money, and operations. One of the other questions that was asked, we need more data about Interfaith and all kinds of details that were asked in the questions. Trends, more requests for transportation. Are you seeing more requests? Yes, we are, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Another trend is that we are being requested to place more volunteers in the schools. Interestingly, this year, we've had requests to place volunteers in the elementary, middle, and high school levels for reading and for math, mainly for reading. Another trend is that we've had increased involvement with diverse community partners, rec departments, schools, service clubs, congregations, and we're seeing that they want to participate in our program, that sweat equity, before they're going to commit to financial support. That's a trend that we've seen in the last 2 years or so. And for volunteers, we've noted a trend that they want to see the impact that they make. They're demanding more technology for communication. They want it to be very efficient. And some want to be more involved with our clients. They want to adopt a senior and really get involved in a person's life. Some more data. You asked, who is your client? Who are you serving? Here's some analysis that came out of 2014. We provided services to 1,021 individuals. This is pretty consistent with previous years. 3/4 are female, 1/4 male. Here's a breakdown on the ages. 23% under age 60. So that's a little bit less than what we had reported to you in January. So that's changed a little bit. 77% were age 60 and over. I think it's interesting to note that 22% of the people that we served in 2014 are age 85 and older. And this is definitely the fastest growing senior age demographic nationally and in Waukesha County. Now, 9% of the people that we served in 2014 have reported a mental illness diagnosis to us. We're doing a little further work with our client demographics to see if there are individuals that we believe are impacted by mental illness but maybe have not reported it to us in our assessment process. But that comes out to 93 people of the 1,021 that we served. And you can also see the breakdown of income. 70% report an annual income under $24,000 a year. And that's significant. There's data to show that in Waukesha County, if an elder is living with an income of $24,000 or less, that they do not have enough income to manage 2 or more chronic health conditions and the medical expenses that come along with that, in addition to their living expenses. So going on. More data about Interfaith. So here's some information about our healthcare transportation, 2013 compared to 2014. You can see the increase in Milwaukee County destinations. A lot of that's going to be freighted, but there are other destinations as well. Total healthcare transportation, point-to-point rides increased. Average rides per month also increased. And our new client intake for the year increased. So a big question that was raised, what about services to people who are age 18 to 59 years old? We know that this is a very emotional issue, not only for our staff, but for our volunteers and for the community, certainly for the people that we serve. Some of our funding requires that we serve adults with disabilities. We need to dig further into this to understand what specific services are really needed by this population. Are we the best agency to provide all of these services? And what partnerships can we develop to provide better services? So the strategy that's been identified is to have a subgroup that will be assigned to take on this important question, separate from strategic planning. We'll talk more about this at the March 3rd meeting. So our plan for March 3rd, we're going to briefly review the mission and vision that's been developed. We feel that it's 99% finished, but that 1% is for you to give us a little bit more input. We're going to give you a report for each of those 4 pillars and the goals. We want you to discuss the work that we've done and get your reaction to it. We're going to break into small groups to develop action plans, metrics, and assign responsibilities. Now that doesn't mean that you're going to walk away with a pillar to have to be in charge of. We're going to talk about the structure of the organization, possibilities for who will own those pillars and those goals. The small groups are going to report back to the full group, and then we're going to review the next steps. So here's an example. Under Identify Partnerships pillar, build and manage diverse partnerships might be the goal. Ensure that ISP, Interfaith Senior Programs, fills true gaps, not assumed gaps. So in a way to do that, we want to maintain strong partnerships with 211, for example, and make sure that our information is correct so we aren't being called by people who call us just because we have seniors as our client population, but maybe somebody else is better suited to provide a particular service. We want to talk about maintaining a business alliance partnership to develop a list of preferred vendors for seniors. So again, the people who call us for services but can afford to pay for them, our staff is better suited to be helping people who don't have the resources, but we want to have information to be able to give to those seniors. So this is an example of the kind of work we want to be doing at the March 3rd meeting. So here's the information once again. March 3rd, 1 to 5 p.m. We'll be at Citizens Bank of Mukwonago, Waukesha location again. Beverages and snacks will be provided. We would encourage you to go back and review the first webinar just to give yourself a little background information about the agency if you feel that's necessary. Also, we would ask that you bring along your folder of information. We will have new folders for people who were not able to attend the January meeting. And finally, here's the unicorn pose. So while you're in a standing position, raise your arms above your head and form a heart with your thumb and index fingers. And I like the part that says it's best done in a tropical place like Hawaii while the sun is setting, or looking out over a beautiful snowy field in Waukesha. So we'll see you next week. Thank you.